Well, I'll just do a quick intro, then I'll hand it straight over to you guys. So, welcome everyone. My name is Michael Young. Welcome to the Scottish Blockchain Meetup. Thanks everyone for their patience after last week. We had a few technical issues with Meetup, but we're here now, and I'm really looking forward to this one. As I said, it's a great subject for myself. I'm very interested in the kind of copy and marketing and messaging going out, so I'm really looking forward to sitting back and listening to this one. And big welcome to Kathryn and Maddie. Thanks very much for this, and I'll pass it straight over to you guys to introduce yourself and take it from there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, do you want me to go first? Yeah, so I'm Kathryn Strachan. I'm managing director at Coffee House. So I'm going to be talking to you tonight about how we can bust some of the myths around blockchain with educational content, and essentially why blockchain companies need to step up their marketing game if they haven't already.
So I am Maddie Kortenaar. I do the marketing at Coffee House. My own interest in blockchain goes quite a while back. I would say that it's been mostly in the decentralized identity space, but I've been following all things blockchain and quite interested in the technology. So yeah, like Kathryn says, I think it's our specialty to really translate the technology to benefits for the customer. So I'm really looking forward to tonight as well. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Let me go ahead and share my screen because I've got a presentation to share with you guys, and we can get started. So welcome again, everyone. It's really nice to be here to talk with you tonight about blockchain and some of the things that you can do with your marketing and why it's so important that you do something with your marketing. So tonight's talk is going to be around busting blockchain myths with educational content, and basically how and why you should educate the market and your audience about blockchain and some of its very awesome benefits. So as I mentioned a little earlier, I am Kathryn Strachan. I am managing director of Coffee House. Coffee House is a content marketing agency specializing in technology, and one of our core areas of expertise is blockchain. So we've worked with a number of different blockchain companies doing different things. We also do quite a lot of work within the fintech space, and most of our fintech clients, their solution is built on blockchain. So it's technology that we're very familiar with, but we obviously come at it from a marketing point of view. So I've never built a blockchain, and I probably never will, but I have written about them, and I do understand them from medium outsider's point of view. Where how I explain our services and kind of what makes us special is that we have this foundation in technology, and we essentially act as a bridge to deliver insights from founders and businesses to their audience. So most of the time there's this information divide that we're trying to cover and that we're bridging because the audience never really understands the technology the way that the people in-house do. So either they're not from a technical background, so they don't understand even the basics, or they are from a bit more of a technical background, and even in that case they're never going to understand the technology like somebody in-house who works with it every single day, who built it from the ground up. That's never going to happen. So what we do, because we have this foundational understanding, is we act as a bridge to help these companies pull out their insights and deliver them to their audience in a way that they understand. So we're kind of the connection, if you will, between blockchain companies and their audiences. So that's a lot of the main theme that we're going to be talking about tonight is how do you actually deliver insights to an audience that doesn't understand blockchain or only understands it to a degree, and how do you educate the market so that blockchain can become mainstream, so it can become something that we use every single day without thinking about it. So blockchain is a really interesting space, as you know, and it's developing quite quickly. So I found this graph, which I thought was really interesting because it shows, the potential trajectory of the blockchain market. So we're in the very early stages of it. So it's not really surprising that there's a lot of misunderstanding around it and that there's a lot of misconceptions connected to blockchain. Blockchain is set to disrupt every single industry, from financial services to healthcare and agriculture. Very few people actually understand the widespread use cases for it. They tend to only really associate it with financial services and more specifically cryptocurrency. Given that, 53% of people say that blockchain technology is a critical priority for their organization. So, that kind of shows, especially, the 10% increase, that people are starting to get it. They're starting to understand why they need blockchain and how it can solve some of these problems. And it's starting to become something that is, perhaps not so scary as it was, a few years ago, or not so misunderstood at least. So, I think going forward into the future, as more people start to understand it and more people, realize the benefits and the values that it can bring to their organization, the more mainstream it's going to become. And, there's a revolution really there that needs to happen, and that, blockchain companies can play a role in by talking about some of these things. So, the messages tonight is that it's about communication. These things don't need to be, new technology doesn't need to be scary if, it's something that we're talking about and we're educating the audience and we're teaching them about how it can be valuable to their organization. And there's definitely a conversation that needs to be had here because there's not enough conversation around it. So off that point, when I say that there's not enough conversation about it, there's a lot of, negative press associated to blockchain because it's associated with cryptocurrency. And, just a quick news. So these are just stories that have appeared relatively recently in the news. It really shows this divided sentiment and, not uncertainty around what it is and, its value. You have everything from that blockchain 2020 election conspiracy to cryptocurrency and bad cryptocurrency news to the week to like the Queen expressing an interest in blockchain. So, you couldn't have like a broader spectrum here, right? You have everything from like, oh, it's really scary, it's cryptocurrency, it's unstable, it's conspiracy, to like the Queen, who is, the head figure for the UK, showing an interest in it. And there's so much like misinformation out there and so much like uncertainty that, as somebody who is brand new to the market, perhaps, somebody who's brand new to the market is not really going to understand how to take all this different news that they're kind of hearing and, all this murky world and, navigate it. So one of the biggest misunderstandings about blockchain is its association with cryptocurrency. So obviously, blockchain became really well known when it supported the Bitcoin cryptocurrency. And, it's gotten to the point where you say Bitcoin, people think blockchain, or you say blockchain and people think Bitcoin. I actually find it quite funny because blockchain, there's so many different ways that it can be used, and that's only one of them. So yes, blockchain underpinned the first major cryptocurrency in 2009, and that's really like when it came and splashed across the headlines and when the public first heard about blockchain. And most people still really closely associate it with cryptocurrency because they haven't heard the stories from these other use cases. Yet, interestingly enough, only 33% of organizations actually use blockchain for digital currency, and that's digital currency. That's not even cryptocurrency. So the amount of use cases for blockchain with cryptocurrency is, perhaps even smaller than that. And I think, it's a problem of only having one story or one narrative. So there's a really great TED Talk actually about Africa and about how Africa has a problem because Africa only has one story. You know, you only hear about the poverty and, you know, the disease and, you know, the African animals. So when you think of Africa, that's immediately what you think of. But that's not the true picture. You know, as somebody who's been to Africa and, you know, knows the continent quite well, there's plenty of places that aren't, you know, poverty ridden, and there's plenty of people living really nice quality lives. You know, that's not the whole story. That's just a story that we see in the media because that's the story that's on, you know, the Christmas adverts for UNICEF. And, you know, it creates this problem of only having one narrative. And I think in a lot of ways, you know, blockchain has a similar problem where the only narrative we really hear, especially, you know, the wider public, is around cryptocurrency. You know, we only really hear it in association to cryptocurrency. We don't hear enough about all the other different ways that it can be used and all the other different use cases for it. So there's this really strong association between blockchain and cryptocurrency, which I kind of hate because, you know, cryptocurrency is associated with the underworld and, you know, risk and volatility and all these things that, you know, are not so typical of blockchain. I mean, blockchain is really secure. You know, once you enter data into it, it's very hard to change it or corrupt it. And, you know, that's one of the benefits of it, is probably one of the most secure ways to store and process data. Yet nobody really realizes that because they just think cryptocurrency dangerous. So I think blockchain really has this problem and the stigma because of cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency is, yeah, it's risky and it's unstable and it's highly volatile. You know, whether it's true or not, you know, there's also the stigma of it being used by the underworld and the anti-establishment because it gets away from the big banks and, you know, you can process transactions without anybody knowing who you are and all these things. But yet blockchain, at least for me, is the complete opposite of that. You know, it's highly secure, it's trusted by government bodies, it's used in healthcare. I mean, it's really not what cryptocurrency is. So it's a problem that it's painted with the same brush. I mean, and of course, there are lots of other blockchain myths as well. You know, the myth that there's only one blockchain when, you know, there's over 6,000 of them, and 6,000 different types of blockchain, you know, that all blockchain transactions are anonymous and therefore, you know, you couldn't possibly know who made what transaction, which, you know, that's not completely true, is it? And that all blockchains are public. Clearly that's not true as well, because you have permission blockchain and private blockchain. So, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding. So I think these myths are, you know, perhaps not as much of a problem as like the bigger, you know, association with cryptocurrency, but it's still evidence of how little, you know, people actually understand of blockchain technology, and how much educational work is really needed to help the public, as well as, you know, organizations who don't have as sound an understanding of blockchain as, you know, as we do, as you do, to understand it and to, you know, think of it in a way that is not going to be scary or totally disruptive. You know, it's just another technology. And, you know, if you think about, I mean, the internet when it first came out was super scary. And, you know, there's a lot of similar reactions to it where, you know, today we don't think anything of going to Google and Googling something, or, you know, I'm on the internet all day long with my work. I mean, most of us are, especially with COVID. So, you know, technology, when there's education around it and when it becomes commonplace, isn't scary, and there's not all these misconceptions around it. So I really believe that this lack of education is one of the biggest barriers for, you know, to the adoption of blockchain technology. So this is a really interesting graph, because it shows some of the problems around why blockchain hasn't become mainstream yet. And, you know, most of these problems kind of stem from a lack of understanding. So, you know, potential security threats. I mean, potential, is that, what does that even mean? I mean, is it an actual security threat? Lack of in-house capabilities, uncertain ROI, concerns over sensitivity, lack of compelling application, technology is unproven. not currently identified as a business priority. I mean, basically all of these reasons here can be fixed and solved with a bit of, education. So basically what this graph is saying to me is that, there's a lot of uncertainty and confusion around what it is and how it can benefit businesses. And with a bit of education, with some teachings and some learnings, we can change a lot of this. I mean, even regulatory issues, open banking, which I'm going to talk about a little bit earlier, is a perfect example of how regulatory issues, prevented open banking at the very beginning from becoming so mainstream. But through education, they're able to bring regulators around, and, regulators start to think, actually, maybe this should be part of the rules that we put in place. Maybe this should actually be part of what we do as common business practice. So this table can be turned, these reasons that, that are preventing blockchain from becoming mainstream can be fixed if we start having some conversations and start educating the audience and start showing, actually what is the ROI and how can it be used, and, make that lack of compelling application, actually very compelling. There's a lot of really interesting work that can be done here. So I mentioned open banking a little bit, but I had a very interesting conversation with James Varga a couple months ago, and James Varga runs Direct ID, and he was an early pioneer for the open banking revolution. And, basically what he was telling me was that at the very early beginning of open banking, he'd go into a room, he'd get laughed out of it. Nobody thought, all the banks, nobody thought that customers would just hand over their details, that, open banking would ever take off. They just laughed them out of the room. But through years and years and years of talking about it, about, educating them, about bringing this awareness to them, they're actually able to get regulators on board. And by getting regulators on board, it then became, commonplace for open banking to be part of banking procedures. And that allowed it to totally accelerate. And, during my conversation with him, he attributed a lot of the success and the adoption of open banking to this massive educational piece that he did around, not just him, but he took part in, around educating both regulators and, the public, and, getting everybody, all the stakeholders to understand. So it became so obvious that it was like, yes, of course we're going to do this. Why would we not do it? And actually it was kind of silly of us to, be so resistant to it. It's definitely, the way forward. COVID actually opens a lot of really interesting opportunities for this, because the world's had to become very digital. So, before COVID, things like digital signatures, all of these things were, banks didn't want to do them. Big, like, traditional players were, very resistant to them. And these days, they're going, why aren't we already doing this? And, this disruption that we've seen. So yes, of course, COVID is bad, but there are some good things to it. And one of the good things is that it's caused quite a lot of disruption in the marketplace that allows technology like blockchain to kind of come in and solve some of these problems that organizations are facing when they're trying to operate remotely. So I was working with a really brilliant client the other day, and one of the things that he said to me was that they wanted to create a world where blockchain is boring. And I think this is just a perfect quote, because, creating a world where blockchain is so normal that nobody ever really thinks of it, that, you don't have to question it. It's just so common that it's boring. I think it encapsulates perfectly, what we should be striving for, So it's so common that, customers, people, organizations just use it without even really having to think about it, just like we do the internet. I mean, nobody's talking about the internet anymore, really, because it's just part of our lives. Or, having a smartphone in your hand is not revolutionary. It's just, you've got a smartphone. Where, like, even when I was a child, my parents didn't have smartphones, and my parents, the first phone was this big thing, and my dad had a phone in his car. I mean, these things, when they first came out would have been really scary. So, the fact that, their children were going to have smartphones like tied to their hands basically, and that you could record things in like real time. You didn't have to get out a video camera. And, you know, as new technology becomes commonplace, it becomes boring. So I think that's like, you know, what this quote is really capturing, and something that us as an organization really want to make happen. You know, we want to educate the audience to such a degree that, you know, everybody's on board with blockchain and there's not even a conversation to be had anymore. So when we're talking about creating conversations around blockchain, we're actually talking about, you know, marketing blockchain most of the time. And, you know, when we work with blockchain companies and deep tech companies in general, we see a lot of like really common problems. So quite often, especially in the more technical fields, you know, clients and companies in-house are too close to the woods to see the trees. So, you know, after you've spent years and years, you know, building the perfect blockchain solution, you know, you want to tell your audience about every single little detail about it, but your audience actually most of the time doesn't want to know about every single detail. They just want to know, like, is it going to work? And like, can it make my life better? So, I mean, that also shows, you know, a lack of customer insights or understanding. I mean, when you know something so well, when you know it, you know, like the back of your hand, it's hard to pick apart or to understand what somebody might not understand. So, you know, there's jargon and there's lingo that, like, you know, you're going to use that would go right over your customers' heads, or that like they're not going to fully grasp or understand. A lot of blockchain companies are, you know, they're brilliant, but they're also very technical focused. So, you know, they're very developer led. So it tends to be very data led space. And most of the time, like, numbers don't translate very well to a narrative. So just presenting somebody with, you know, a sheet of numbers, they're like, great, but what does this mean? Another problem with blockchain marketing in general as well is that, like, quite often blockchain companies, because the market is so new, because the companies tend to be relatively new, marketing hasn't quite matured yet. So it's forgotten and it's neglected. And, you know, this kind of creates this problem. This is a problem that, like, you know, not enough people are talking about it, and not enough people are talking about it in a way that their customers can understand, to create this education, to create this conversation. And, you know, when they do talk about it, it's very technical, it's very jargon, it's very like going right over people's heads, because, you know, it's hard to understand, you know, the other side of the table sometimes. So one of the things that I definitely want to do is to talk you through some of the ways that you can overcome this problem, that you can, you know, start to build better relationships and open conversations and start to educate the market and start to, you know, really overcome some of these problems that are stopping blockchain from becoming, you know, as mainstream as the internet. Maybe one day, right? So it really has to start with the audience. You have to know who you're talking to, you know, and you can't be talking to yourself, which is one of the problems when you don't understand who you're talking to. You end up writing something, or, you know, issuing a piece of content that is essentially talking to yourself. And, you know, most of the time, you're probably not going to sell your blockchain solution to another blockchain provider. You're going to be selling it to somebody who, you know, could use your blockchain solution as part of their application that they're building, or, you know, within their organization. So, I mean, some of the things you want to start thinking about is, like, what misconceptions might your audience have? Like, what do they think when they think blockchain? Do they know what it is? What is their current understanding of blockchain? So, you know, they might have more of a technical understanding, and then you don't have to start at the beginning. You know, you can go in a little bit more technical rather than like, what is blockchain? How does it work? You can, you know, contribute a bit more, get a bit more technical, but the level of technicality that you use needs to reflect what they currently understand, or you're just going to shoot over their heads. Another really great thing to think about is, what pain points can blockchain solve? So pain points, especially marketing, are incredibly effective, because how I always explain it is that a pain point positions you as a headache reliever. So if somebody has a problem, you know, if you don't position yourself with pain points, you're a vitamin. So, you know, it's nice to have, kick it down the road, do it next quarter, do it next year. It goes on and on and on. You know, it's easy enough to put your vitamins off for the next day, because they're not super essential, right? But if you have a headache, you need to take that headache reliever immediately. You cannot wait an hour. You cannot wait till tomorrow. You have to take it right now, right this second. And when you can alleviate somebody's pain, when you understand that pain point and you target it, you become a headache reliever. So, they're not going to wait. They need it right now. They need your solution right this second. So it's far more effective, to leverage that psychological elements that, all humans, because we are human at the end of the day, that all humans have, so that you can position yourself and your company as something that people need immediately. Once you've kind of done that, you might also want to think about what do they need to know before contacting you. So a really great way to do that is by asking your sales team, what questions are you hearing all the time? Because, if you're hearing questions from your sales team, I can guarantee you that there are people out there who are thinking them and not asking them, because, asking a question, especially about something like blockchain, it's scary. You don't want to look like you're dumb. You don't want to be asking a stupid question. So there will be lots of people who just aren't contacting you, who aren't asking. So if your sales team are hearing the same kinds of questions again and again, you need to make sure that you're answering those questions on your website in a place that people can find them without having to reach out to you directly. And you kind of want to gather all these insights and create customer personas so that you have a clear picture, a clear painting of who you're talking to on the other side of the computer, who's reading your content, who's visiting your website, who are these people, what do they do, what keeps them awake at night, and how can you help them? Shockingly, probably like 8 out of 10 companies that I talk to, and I talk to a lot of companies, don't have these customer insights. But, in a crowded marketplace, in a marketplace where, everybody is competing for attention and time, the only way to cut through that noise and to really, build relationships and connect with people is by understanding who they are. So, if you're in a big crowded room of, thousands of people and you're just like, hey, everyone, nobody's going to listen to you. If you're like, hey, guy in red shirt, he'll turn around and he'll look at you. Probably several people in red shirts will turn around and look at you. So, it's far more effective to have customer personas and customer avatars that you can use both in your marketing and your sales and everything you do to make sure that you're connecting with people and that your message is resonating with them. So, for me, almost all good marketing starts with understanding your customers and understanding who they are and where they are and what leads them to you. What trigger points are they? What are they going through in the weeks and the months before they contact you? And how can you leverage that to show them that you understand, to show them that, you're the best blockchain provider for them and that you're going to guide them through this process and that, you're going to make it super easy and straightforward and there's nothing that they need to be concerned or worried about because, you've got it. So once you've kind of figured out and created, customer avatars and you have all these really great details and insights into who you're trying to talk with, the next thing to do is really to start to set the foundations. So when I mean foundations, one of the most fundamental things I believe in marketing is your website. So all marketing, all sales activity ultimately leads back to your website. So whether you're doing PR or PPC or you're going to trade shows, whatever you're doing, people will always come and look at your website as the next touch point. So, they might read a really interesting article about you. They might meet you at a networking event, but it's always going to come back to your website. So your website needs to be the foundation that can support all of that. You're going to have people looking at your website before they even talk to you. It's often the first touch point for a lot of prospects. They might not have even ever met you before, but they might find you online and they might look at they're definitely going to look at your website. So this is the best place to showcase your capabilities and really start educating your audience. This is where you need to showcase yourself in the best light possible. So, a one-page website or website that's just plain text and no design is not going to cut it. It's really not. So you need a website that aligns with your audience, that, avoids overcomplicated jargon, that makes it simple and easy to understand, and that guides them through a process and kind of captures everything that makes you special. Also pointing them to additional resources. So this is, where you can start to educate them by creating long form content, creating videos, creating, educational content that kind of teaches them and answers some of the questions that they're thinking about, that they want to know, and helps, really fuel this conversation around blockchain. So SEO is, believe it or not, there's quite a lot of search terms around blockchain. I mean, there's thousands of people looking every single month, both for like long tail keywords, which are more like question based, as well as short tail keywords. So every single website, I mean, your website is pointless if it's not optimized for SEO, I believe, at least. SEO is a really key element to getting your company, especially a company that, perhaps isn't super well known, that isn't Google, isn't Microsoft, in front of a new audience who are looking for blockchain solutions, or who are looking for education around what is blockchain or how it works, or is blockchain safe. So, your website should really implement SEO best practices to get you in front of these audiences that are looking for generic keywords without, actually knowing your brand name. And, also leveraging search trends to reflect market changes. So you can talk about really topical, really relevant things, and add to and create even a conversation around things that are happening, so that, when people look at the news, or when people look at a certain trend or subject that's happening, they see, the full picture, rather than, what we're seeing at the moment, which is this very divided, very confused, very uncertain picture of blockchain. And finally, I want to talk about educational long-form content, because long-form content is really the space where you can dive into detail about these things. So, your website is the foundation for it, but you then want to create educational long-form content, because a landing page on a website, can only contain so much information. So where all that great educational insights and where, that value comes from is really around long-form content. So most blockchain related keywords are actually for long tail question keywords, which actually kind of shows that there's a real need for educational content. The fact that, what is it? 2,400 people every single month are looking for what is blockchain. I mean, that just shows how much of a need there is there, that thousands of people are looking every single month in the UK for what is blockchain. It shows that, people are desperate to understand. They really want to understand. There's a real thirst there for knowledge. And, that needs to be catered for. We need to answer those questions. We need to get in front of them, and we need to talk to them so that they understand what it is and how it works, and, that it's safe. So, getting in front of them, answering those questions, publishing regular content helps disrupt some of these myths, so that we can set blockchain apart from cryptocurrency, that we can showcase and champion all the different ways that it can be used. We can make it as simple and straightforward as, just a digital ledger, because it is really, in a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be this big, scary, mysterious thing that nobody understands. It can be something as simple as like a record. It doesn't have to be that scary. And once it isn't that scary, it's going to overcome a lot of those barriers to adoption by adding that other perspective. So, blockchain will no longer have the problem of only having one narrative, which is a massive problem at the moment. So, I really believe that the more long-form content that we can publish and create around blockchain, the more companies can educate and encourage and adoption. So, one day blockchain will become boring, which will be a fantastic moment when it's just so commonplace that it doesn't even, stir or rattle anybody. when you're thinking about long form content too, like you do really want to think about it through the sales funnel, because, you know, as you know, it's going to be a very long process. You know, most sales funnels for tech companies and blockchain companies can be 9 to 12 months. So, you know, we want to create a nurturing environment that starts with like those very basic awareness, very basic, like, what is blockchain, and educates people throughout this process. So, you know, passes them through awareness, consideration, to when they finally convert. Because, I mean, that is kind of the point at the end of the day, isn't it? That, like, you know, we want them to adopt, we want them to convert, we want them to use your blockchain solutions. So, I mean, at the top, you might have, you know, that long form content, that thought leadership articles. In consideration, case studies are definitely something that, you know, blockchain companies should be doing, so that you can prove the ROI, you can prove the different use cases, you can prove the value with like real life examples that actually happened. And then, you know, afterwards too, you know, you have to think about the onboarding process, because it's not just as simple as like, okay, they convert and that's it. You know, it can be quite a complicated process to get them set up, and, you know, you need to guide them through that. So you need to have a mapped out onboarding process, you know, that probably includes like post-conversion emails, that, you know, includes, you know, how-to guides, or, you know, answer some of the questions that they might have during those very, very early stages. If you're offering like a free sandbox or demo product, you know, that actually gets them from that point to converting, and really mapping out and thinking about how are you going to support them, not only at the beginning, but all the way through this process, so that we can get everybody, you know, using blockchain. So I wanted to give you some of the examples of educational content that we've created, you know, both for blockchain companies as well as, you know, for financial companies, you know, for companies that, you know, do SaaS software. So, you know, it doesn't always just have to be, this conversation isn't just solely in the blockchain provider realm. You know, so even just writing about essential blockchain skills for accountants of the future, you know, or getting a bit more technical and writing about how to analyze blockchain data using dashboards, or even how blockchain applications can help businesses. So, you know, all geared at slightly different audiences, all with different technicality levels. And, you know, really being able to educate people regardless of an audience, regardless of what level of understanding they have, and regardless of their background and where they're coming from. Another really good thing that you need to perhaps be thinking about and doing are use cases and case studies. So case studies are the highest converting piece of content you can create. You know, by the time somebody comes to read a case study, they're so far down the funnel that they are ready to buy from you. They're simply, you know, determining whether or not you're the right person for the job. So creating case studies that represent your work, that represent the different ways that your technology can be used, that showcase and provide social proofs of real examples of companies using blockchain, is really essential. And so much so that, like, I believe that, you know, case studies should be part of every single website. To have a website that doesn't have case studies is a massive missed opportunity in my opinion. So, you know, that might be something like blockchain use cases across multiple industries, if you want to talk about multiple different ways that it can be used, or it might be, you know, a specific example of like how we provided a blockchain solution for a telecoms giant. You know, there's lots of different ways that you can kind of frame this, but pulling out some of your really good work and showcasing it, and promoting your company, and, you know, the skills and the credibility and the expertise that you have, and building up that trust and that relationship with people who are on your website, who are considering you, is pretty essential. So I want to tell you a little bit about one of our clients who, they're a blockchain provider based in Germany, who we did work with to re-optimize, you know, their service pages, to create service pages that resonated with their audience. We have this case study on our website if you want to read more about it, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the results that we achieved for them. So they're a relatively small company, though they are growing quite quickly. But before they kind of came to us, they had been writing content in-house. So it was very technically focused. It was very, it was hard for people who maybe didn't have the same level of understanding as blockchain to understand. So we did a campaign with them where we spent 3 months refining, expanding, and optimizing their service landing pages, and really aligning their service landing pages with their audience, and making sure that we explained, the value and what people needed to know before they contacted them, and what their pain points were. So, where were they before they came to the service page? Like what was their mentality? What was their psychological situation? Where were they? So we really dug into this brand by asking questions about their target audience, and how their services solve their audience's pain points, what prospects needed to know before engaging with their services. And then once we had all those insights, we created SEO optimized landing pages that targeted keywords within their chosen market and that were relevant to them. And our content, really helped them get on the map as a blockchain solution provider and as a blockchain consultant, so that they could get in front of an audience that were looking for things like this. And we saw quite a big increase in website traffic to their pages, especially the pages that we optimized for. And we saw, them ranking on page 1 for some really top, really important keywords as well. So, we got them in front of the right audience, and, help them drive leads to their website, and, actually educate people and have this conversation about how they could help and how they could, support them in their blockchain endeavors. So this is, we have a full case study on this on our website if you're interested in reading a bit further, but I just wanted to show you, some of the real possibilities of, what you can do, and, perhaps what you should be doing as well. And, what that work might look like and what that might translate to. So that kind of brings me to